think the movie has gotten a bad rap from people. I liked it. I had a fun time with it. I think people sometimes people have their knives out for movies in like the critic sphere, where it's this kind of group think of, oh, this is lazy. That's just an episode of the show.
Welcome to this
Houston, we have a problem.
Episode of the Maz's Musings podcast, where no, there are no problems here, just some great conversation. I am joined today by Matt Conway, who's been on the podcast before to talk movies, and we're talking some more movies. Now, this episode is going to be focused on movies about space. And the original idea for this stemmed from the Artemis 2 mission. And I talked with Matt about this back then, but we couldn't get the schedules lined up. So it was something that we put a pin in, and we both had the time. So here we are, ready to talk about it now. I love having Matt on. He's got such great insight and perspectives on movies. A lot of times we end up having very different lists when we're talking about various movies, simply because we're coming from different points in life. I'm a bit older than Matt. Matt also has a bit more of a background in the number of movies that he's seen and the way that he looks at movies compared to the way that I do. So always a great conversation. Matt is also going to help me out with this week's Maz's Mickey Minute. So you'll hear that when we have our main conversation. And of course, we have to have our joke of the week. So Meghan is here to help us out with that.
And now it's time for Meghan's
Cuckoo Bananas Joke.
Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
Do you have a joke for us today?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
Where do squids go when they feel sick?
I don't know. Where do squids go when they feel sick?
To the doctor, puss. Not the doctor, not the octopus, the doctor puss.
Good one. All right.
I started the joke without Daddy.
Yes, you hit play record before I was ready. But I got here just in time.
But you got here when the countdown was going.
Yes. All righty. Say goodnight.
Good night. Good night.
All right, time to blast off into our main topic, our conversation with Matt Conway. All right, well, I am here joined once again by Matt Conway, film aficionado and critic extraordinaire. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure to be back on the pod.
A lot of people who have listened to the pod already are familiar with you, but we may have a few new listeners. You know, we may be up from 12 to, 14 or 15. So why don't you just quickly give us kind of a rundown on who you are and why we should listen to you.
Yeah, I have over a decade of experience as a film critic. I've kind of been in a somewhat dormant state last few months, but it's something I'm always considering what my next project will be. Maybe even a book, who knows? But I've just been a film lover for all my life. Love all genres of movies. And my girlfriend loves Disney. So there's a great intersection there with Chris, where I have all the similar kind of Disney experiences and have developed. I'm definitely more of a Padawan than a Jedi Master like Chris when it comes to the Disney stuff, but I at least am, enveloped into the lore and have a lot of experiences with it.
All right. Well, I'm happy to have you back. Thank you for coming on. I'm glad that we were able to make this work. We had talked about this actually even like a couple of months ago when the Artemis 2 mission was going on and space was on everybody's brain. So I was no different, and I pitched this, and well, then schedules and trips to Disney and illnesses, got in the way, but we're here now and we're excited to do this. But before we get into that main topic, I know I put you a little bit on the spot here, but you did mention Disney. You just returned from a trip to Disney. So I'm going to have you help me out with this week's Mazza's Mickey Minute with basically a truncated, a brief trip report, some of the things that you did, some of your favorite parts of the trip, some of your impressions, because I know that the parks have been in a transitional period. So just interested to hear how your experience was. But before we do that, of course, we've got the jingle.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra!
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
All right. So I've thought about whether or not that's actually too long, but I can't figure out whatever I would possibly cut out of that. So it's going to stay that way, and people can just skip over it if they want. But it just, it's so many feels.
I think it's just right.
I think that I was talking with Eileen. I was just thinking during the monorail part of it, that did you fly into Orlando?
I did, yes.
And so you took the tram from the terminals to the main building. The mayor of Orlando is not running for re-election, so my world is going to change because his voice on the recording welcoming me to Orlando is no longer going to be there after I believe his term ends in 2027.
Yeah.
So my next trip to Disney, which is in February of next year, is going to be the last time that I hear him greet me, and it's going to be weird.
I have a lot of fun late night airplanes or airport stories there of not knowing what the right tram to get on is with my girlfriend and her mom, and going back and forth. So always a lot of funny memories there.
All right, so let's get into it. You went to in the past couple of weeks, you were at Walt Disney World, and of course there were some things that were happening. There are some transitions happening in the parks, and some things that were not open at the time that may be opening now. But just talk about what was your trip like? How long were you there? What did you hit? And what were some of your favorite experiences?
Yeah, of course. So this is my 8th time, I think, going with my girlfriend and her mom. So a lot of different experiences over the year. I really want to focus on kind of the newer things I got to do. The thing that's probably the biggest standout to me was the villain show at Hollywood Studios. This is a newer attraction, and I loved it. I mean, I'm more of a show guy personally. When it comes to roller coasters, I'm just praying not to get seasick. I just want to make it through the end of the ride, okay? But the villain show, very dynamic, a great blending of actual performances with the technical aspects with all these screens. It's very dynamic. There's some very catchy songs. Like I actually went to see it twice the same day when I was at Hollywood Studios, just because the song was still in my head, and it's like, I gotta find that on Spotify after. So I love that. It's gonna be a new, staple for me every time I go to Disney. But yeah, I was in Disney for 3 days. We went to Hollywood Studios, Epcot, and Magic Kingdom. One of the other new things I got to see is the new Thunder Mountain. I love that ride. It scares me to death. I think everyone who's a Disney person listening, there's that moment. It's going up a hill, and you kind of feel yourself fly out of the seat, and there's this like little small thing. I always feel like I'm gonna lose my head. I'm always terrified. But they added some great new fixtures to that. That ride's still a lot of fun. Tianu's Bayou Adventure. I really love all the animatronics. I had the misfortune, especially as a roller coaster scaredy cat, of being in the front row for the first time. And the whole time I was just saying to my girlfriend, how could you let this happen to me? Why? Just I couldn't even enjoy the ride because I was just dreading the drop the whole time. And of course, the picture on the ride caught me just squeezing her arm with my eyes closed as the drop went down. So that's always a fun experience. And then Epcot, I mean, always a lot of great food and drinks. The festival they have going on. My favorite every year, the Violet Lemonade. I don't know if you ever had one, but it's like kind of like a frozen lemonade. It's like purple. Oh my gosh, I could drink 3 of those. There's like a little flour in it too. What else did we try? We tried. Oh,
It sounds familiar, but I don't think we've ever been there for that festival, have we? I'm trying to remember. But anyway, before you get too far ahead, one of the things that they did with Big Thunder Mountain was they switched out the track. Did you notice did the ride feel different at all, or was it just some of the other things that they put in there that were just more noticeably different to the other senses?
I'd say it felt a little smoother. Like that ride definitely could have a history of being a little rugged, a little rough around the edges, for sure.
Little chiropractor action.
Yeah, exactly. So that did feel improved. I did find it interesting. We went on the Carousel of Progress, and then we just saw today that they're going to be doing a remodeling of that for next year. So that's interesting because I always joke with my girlfriend who loves that. I don't want to call it a ride, but experience. That's like where I kind of rest my eyes for 10 minutes. It's just like I've seen it so often. But the one other new thing I wanted to mention at Magic Kingdom, Buzz Lightyear is new and improved. So instead of the stationary kind of cannon things that were getting kind of old and disheveled, it's now this kind of mobile gun, which is fun. And they definitely changed like the scoring around and everything. I have been a Galactic Ranger in the past, getting that 99999. But this time they make it definitely harder to get a high score. And apparently my girlfriend told me you can get past 1,000,000, but I like the new gun because you can kind of angle. Like there was points in the ride where you're waiting to move to the next portion. I was just kind of angling in the back, like still shooting some targets and stuff. So I thought that was a nice little improvement as well.
Yeah, my issue with that, I never know what I'm shooting at when it's the stationary gun. And I don't know, I mean, the last time I was actually riding alone because, well, our last trip, basically, Eileen and Meghan did everything together and I was left by myself. So I actually had 2 guns.
Oh, nice.
When I was doing it. So I was bad twice. But yeah, I've never been very good at that game, mostly because like I haven't been able to maneuver the gun the way I wanted to. So I never quite knew what I was aiming at.
Yeah. It wasn't
never
as
got
clear
it
before
quite right
with where your laser was pointing. I agree with you there. And the other thing too, and my girlfriend had figured this out through the deep Reddit or whatever, that there were certain like high mark targets you could hit, and it's like you'll instantly get Galactic Ranger. And the sense that she found that, she got that a few times, but they've changed that all around. So now there's no cheat codes as much. I mean, I'm sure people will find one eventually, but it was nice to kind of level the playing field.
Excellent. Yeah, and as far as the villains show go, I'm interested to see that. My theory is that is something that is going to be there temporarily until they're kind of like testing the waters a bit with that, before the villains land is open, in Magic Kingdom. So I think that's the ultimate goal, is that we'll eventually shift there. I wouldn't be surprised if then they turn that area into more of like a new like Muppets Corner with a different, not Muppet Vision 3D, but a different Muppet show to kind of pair off with the new Rock and Roller Coaster, which looks amazing from what I've seen, and from the couple of my friends to do another podcast have got a chance to do the one of the pass holder previews for that, and so they talked about that on their podcast. Listen to Tom and Michelle on the Hyperion Adventures podcast this past week for that one. Hi, Tom and Michelle. I love shouting you guys out. But anyway, I'm rambling. This is your segment, and this is actually supposed to be a short segment. So anything else you want to add about your experiences, or anything else new that you want to add before I cue up the exit music?
No, I just want to comment. I think that's a great theory about eventually moving the Villain Show to Villain's Land when it opens. I'm just happy they'll preserve that as a fixture, and I would love a new Muppet Show. So I love the theory.
Well, and of course, before we get into the exit jingle, it sounds like you had a really great trip. And, one thing that I always am sure to recommend to people if they're looking for a great trip is to get help. And I always recommend We Do Travel Right. My friend Emily and her team are awesome. They will help you figure out what your priorities are for you and your group, whether you're going with your girlfriend, whether you're going with your family. And the best part is it's all free, Matt. Their services are all free. And that's because Disney's already charging you for the service, even if you're not using it. And by the way, Universal and cruise lines and all inclusives, they all do this. So you're already paying for the agent. So doesn't it just make sense to use an agent?
That's a great idea.
Unless you, even if you are, so I consider myself not quite an expert. I know you said Jedi Master. I don't know if I'm quite, I don't think I've been granted the rank of Master, but I'm on the council.
I love it.
But anyway, if you are looking for your next Disney vacation, you can go to wedotravelright.com/Mazza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA and get your next magical vacation started today.
Now I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
So let's get into our main topic. And like I said, we were talking about our favorite movies that have to do with space. And the one thing that I kind of put as a caveat on this, at least for my list, was I'm keeping Star Wars out of it because it feels like a bit of a layup if I did that. So I'm looking beyond that. I'm looking at other movies that kind of fit that category, and there's certainly a lot of other stuff that we can draw from. So I'm willing to bet that we're going to have pretty different lists here. I'm not sure how many you came up with, but
I have around 10, but I grouped a lot of them.
Oh boy.
I grouped some of them together like into pairs where there's like a similarity or commonality to them.
All right. Well, I have 5. So
perfect.
So why don't we? I'll let guests go first. We can start with you, and really, we're just talking about these. May not even be necessarily the best movies in all cases, but they're just the movies that we love, that we appreciate when we think about movies that fit this kind of subject material. These are the ones that we immediately think of. So, what is your first movie or group of movies?
Yeah, so it's kind of a genesis story for me. Obviously growing up, I love Star Wars, but I really credit the year of 2009 for getting me into science fiction movies because of just the great amount of sci-fi movies that were in theater, space films, and Star Trek and Avatar. Both those two really rocked my world when I was a kid. I saw them probably two or three times each in theaters. For Star Trek, obviously a famed, iconic series, but the J.J. Abrams film really brought a fresh new energy to the table. We had a fantastic cast with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, etc. Carl Urban as Bones, which I absolutely love. it was a movie that really captured the spirit of the show, while, like I said, injecting a new, fresh energy into it. Uh, Avatar, I know it's kind of controversial to some people. It's not everyone's favorite, but I probably saw that 3 or 4 times in the theater, and just getting lost in the worlds it creates in outer space, and seeing the 3D and the visual effects. It's truly a marvel. And I really credit both those movies for me being such a sci-fi junkie now today.
You know, when it comes to Avatar, that's something that I feel like I would probably have appreciated more if I saw it in theaters, but I didn't. So, the actual story felt like a familiar story, which isn't something that's necessarily, a bad thing. I mean, I talked about in a podcast where we talked about George Lucas, how George Lucas borrowed from a lot of things when making Star Wars. And so it was something that felt familiar, while bringing something new to the table. And I think that when you look at it visually, Avatar kind of like does the same thing, but it loses a lot of that when you're watching it not on the big screen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I've literally only seen it once at home, but I saw it 3 times when it came out, and then I saw it in 2022 before the second one came out in theater. So I saw it 4 times, always in 3D, and the 3D is just marvelous. I mean, I think 90% of 3D movies are just a waste, and it just makes the picture look dimmer. But the 3D in those movies is very evocative, and it really transports you into that world.
Yeah, I think the first time, actually not the first time, I had seen it one other time, but the most recent time that I had watched it through, the first one, I haven't seen any of the subsequent movies, was right before we were going to go see Pandora at Animal Kingdom for the first time.
Oh, nice.
And I did, you kind of get a taste of what the movie would look like in 3D with the, the Flight of Passage. Have you ridden that?
I haven't been to Animal Kingdom in the longest time, and I keep begging my girlfriend on one of our trips to venture there, because I would love to see all the Avatar stuff.
But it's basically you're riding a Banshee, and it's a 3D ride. So I think you're getting some of that element of seeing the movie in the theaters in 3D as well. So I highly recommend it. If you need me to talk to your girlfriend for you, I'm happy to do so, and
I love
and
it.
give my pitch for Pandora and for Animal Kingdom as a whole.
Perfect.
All right, so my first one, and this one is a bit obvious. My first one is Apollo 13. That movie, let's see, so that was 1995, so I was around 13 when that movie came out. And, I always had a fascination with the Apollo program. Like, growing up, Neil Armstrong was one of my heroes. So, getting to see this movie, this was one of the rare movies I saw growing up that I saw on the big screen. And, seeing it that way, I've seen it plenty of times since. I used to have like the double VHS, because you couldn't watch that movie on one VHS, you needed the two.
Yeah.
It added to the, you had a greater appreciation for the grandness of the, I don't want to say adventure, because, well, in a way it was an adventure, but at the same time, you felt the stakes a little bit more, because it really did have that feeling like you're with these characters in space as they were dealing with the uncertainty of everything that was going on. And also just a phenomenal cast. You look at it from, obviously Tom Hanks and Bill Paxton, Kevin Bacon, Gary Sinise, Ed Harris. It's a murderer's row of really talented actors. And if I recall, even like, Tom Hanks bears a resemblance to the real life figure that he's playing. So when something like that adds a little more realism to the whole thing. Now, granted, there are parts of it that are very much dramatized, but I think it's done in a way that doesn't take away from the authenticity of the movie. There are a couple of scenes. I think there was one time that I read something where Tom Hanks was talking about, the burn that they had to do, where they had to keep the earth in the window. Apparently that was a lot less dramatic than they made it sound. And he said that they listened to the recordings of everything that happened when they were preparing for these roles. And that was basically just like, okay, starting the burn complete. And that was so, but I think that both the way that it was written, even with these extra bits of dramaticism, and the way that the actors executed their roles, really just made it all feel really authentic. There wasn't a moment where you're just kind of like, so, because any one of these is based on a true story. So there's going to be those moments. It's just like whether or not you can make those moments work without damaging, other parts of the film.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an excellent pick. I had that on my short list. I've seen it twice, and both times we're in school. So one of these days I'm dying to watch it on my big screen TV at home. I like you nailed it about the authenticity of it. And I love kind of having the interplay of obviously the daring mission in space, but also the ground control, the technicians, and just the complexities of that dynamic, the working relationship there. It gives you a lot more appreciation for just the enormity of it all. And it's something you could really kind of overlook when you're not, have your boots in the ground in those situations. Ron Howard's direction is very taut and engaging. It's really a classic, and it holds up so well. And I think that's a movie. I think it's 30-year anniversary passed recently. Or 20-year. But I would love to get that re-released in theaters so I could have a chance to see it on the big screen myself.
Yeah. So it was 1995. So it was what, 30 years old last year, if I'm doing math correctly.
Yeah, you're right. So maybe 35-year anniversary, they'll hit us with the theater release.
But yeah, and you mentioned Ron Howard's direction. I think that one of the things that's really notable about this is it's like a 3-hour movie, but it never really feels like it drags, like we're talking about, basically a journey around the moon, where certainly there was probably a fair amount of downtime, but being able to tell this story in such a cohesive way, and moving between ground control and what's happening, in the module at the same time, with the pacing that they're able to set, I think was really awesome. I also just wanted to make a quick, one of my favorite kind of like moments in the movie, which is when they're, it's getting cold and the tape recorder is floating around, and it's slowly losing battery, and you can hear the music slowly winding down before coming to a stop. And it was just such a great way to kind of like encapsulate what was happening with these characters in that module at that moment, because it really was. It was reaching a point in the journey where they were getting depleted themselves. So just things like that also kind of helped bridge the gap in like, bits of time that they skipped over. It's just like, this is where we are with this now. So yeah, really great. Love that movie.
And anytime there's like a true story movie and you can turn it into like a page turner where it's like you're on the edge of your seat, even though you might know what actually happens. I think that's always a real achievement. So I love the pick. My next pick, I think this is one you might have. We'll see. Galaxy Quest. To kind of stay within the Star Trek realm in its own way. But I rewatched it recently, and it was a movie I always loved as a kid. I just think it's the perfect studio comedy. You got some great satire in there. You have an amazing cast with Tim Allen, Sam Rockwell, Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman, of course, in the kind of
Tony
Spock
Shalhoub.
Tony Shalhoub, exactly. It's such an ingenious premise. Like it's a perfect marriage, like I said, of satire while being its own kind of unique presence in comedy. And I just think the balance of everything in that movie works absolutely perfectly. There's just so many big laughs to be had. And yeah, I just think it's, as far as being a comedy in space, we don't see a lot of those. I think it's honestly probably the quintessential example in my book.
No, yeah, it's great. And what I love about it is it's not just a parody of, the kind of show that it was based off of. It's a spoof of Star Trek, obviously, but it's also like a satire and parody of the fan culture as well. So like there are these two things that they actually marry together very well in this movie. And like you said, great cast. This was actually the movie that I put on when Alan Rickman died. Like this was the first thing that I thought of, was just like, I'm going to watch this as kind of like the tribute, So I know everybody else was watching Harry Potter, but I was just like Galaxy Quest.
I love it. I think too, it's like, obviously Spock and Kirk, they're such indelible roles, and you have such a picture of those two. But in their own way, Tim Allen and Alan Rickman, they kind of play within that, like those images, while also doing their own thing with it. Like it's a really impressive high wire act that they're kind of walking, where it's like you feel a bit of the Shatner in Tim Allen, but he's also being Tim Allen and being funny and kind of like a schmarmy movie star type. And you feel kind of Alan Rickman's cold kind of comedy stylings and everything. So it's one of those movies you could just put on like always. Like I probably have watched it like 5 or 6 times, but a couple of times it'll be like my background movie, and it's just I can always just get a couple of laughs in while I'm doing work or whatever else. So I'm really a near perfect movie in my book, to be honest.
And one of my favorite stories from that was actually an Alan Rickman story, and I really hope that it's true because I saw it on the internet, so who knows. But there was a scene that they were shooting, and Tim Allen, after the scene was shot, kind of was just like, boy, I'm really feeling some feelings that I'm not feeling great about right now, so I'm gonna take a break, go back to my trailer. And Alan Rickman turns to everybody, is just like, I think he just experienced acting for the first time.
That's too funny. Yeah,
I really hope that's true.
It probably is. It's some of their real life dynamic on the big screen. That's too funny.
Alrighty. So my next one is another more serious. I kind of, in my list, I went from serious to more fun and goofy. So my next one was Contact, starring Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey. This is before the McConaissance. James Woods is in it. Basically, have you seen this movie?
I have
you
not.
Seen Contact?
I'm adding it to my movie watch list right now because I'm very curious to hear about it.
So basically, the premise of Contact is Jodie Foster plays this woman who works for in SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and she discovers a signal coming from Vega, and So this launches this whole thing where, it's really interesting because like the actual space travel in this movie is probably about 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the movie. And the rest of the movie is not only the government grappling with what to do with this, because they end up getting sent, first figuring out how to decipher the message, and then figuring out that the message is basically blueprints on how to build a space travel device so that they can connect. And so there's all of these questions, in the government. Should we do this? This could actually be a weapon. Then there's also this really interesting examination of spirituality and the response to that. And his first name's escaping me. Gary Busey's son.
Jake Busey.
Jake Busey plays like this fanatical preacher in this movie, and he's really got this haunting presence. It's a very small, it's a very short role, but it's something that is really one of those attention-grabbing performances. And the Matthew McConaughey character is some kind of, I forget exactly, but he's some kind of religious figure. So he is basically the, for whatever denomination he is the spiritual advisor for the president. And he and the Jodie Foster character have had a pre-existing relationship. So there are all these interesting dynamics, and it's really much more a study of how people would respond to this happening than it is, the actual physical act of acting upon it and taking the trip. So, highly recommend this movie. It's an imperfect movie, but I really, especially being somebody who grew up in the church and knowing people who are not believers, even in a higher power. The Jodie Foster character in this case is an atheist, so that is an entire dynamic here. So there are a lot of things that are going on in this movie, and especially given my upbringing, I found it really, really fascinating.
I'm very intrigued to see it now, and I love movies that are able to approach space, extraterrestrial life with a more realistic realm, and kind of like pondering the question of like, well, what would really happen if this kind of experience came within our own zeitgeist, and how would we respond? And I think the religious elements of it is a very thoughtful inclusion, because I'm sure we would see some kind of, alien symbol of God, things like that kind of sprout up. So I'm very intrigued to see this, and I love the cast, especially Jodie Foster. And I just saw Robert Zemeckis directed it as well, who Back to the Future, Cast Away, so many great movies under his belt.
Yeah, there are a couple pacing issues with this movie. It's been a while since I've seen it, so maybe being a bit older, some of the subtleties may not be lost on me anymore, and those pacing issues won't exist in the same way. But I really liked it. And again, it's not a small character. It's a character that doesn't have a lot of screen time, but James Woods plays a politician who is basically the political foil for the Jodie Foster character. And it's the perfect role for him. He's not quite playing Hades from Hercules, but it's that same kind of like, there's a bit of scheming that's going on there that really makes that character interesting.
He plays that kind of role so well. But for my next pick, I actually have a fun comparison to yours, because I have one movie with Jake Busey in it. Who would have thought two Jake Busey movies would get mentioned today? And a movie with McConaughey. Or actually, no, the McConaughey movie I'll save later. But Starship Troopers. I love Paul Verhoeven.
You and me again. We're closer on this list than I thought we'd be.
I love that we're in lock sync. It is one of my favorite movies. An absolutely bold and daring satire. It also works as a pretty decent action movie on its own, but there is something about the movie that it almost feels like a parody at times. Like the characters are like these 90210 types that the acting is almost intentionally bad and very kind of like stiff. Like I feel like there's things that are very slyly done throughout the movie. I mean, you have like Carmen Electra in it and Casper Van Dien, and like I said, they have these very 90210 type personas.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah, exactly. He was like the only, but you do have a really great supporting cast. You have Dean Norris as like one of the generals and Clancy Brown. So it's like the leads are kind of these goofballs, and then they're surrounded by a lot of like really assured actors. But I just think its message rings so true, and the movie puts on such a face throughout most of it of the rah-rah patriotism. But there's so many there's small glimmers where you feel the horror of things, and it feels so impactful. Like the scene that really sticks out to me is when I forget his character name, but when Casper Van Dien is about to be stranded and he has the bug chasing him and he's just unloading his clip, like fearing he's about to die. Like there's moments where the movie breaks through the glass ceiling of its artifice where it really lands a walloping punch. While at the same time, I think just being a really hilarious movie, a great, farce of fascism and kind of overly militarized kind of state of being. So I love that movie. It's an all-time classic. And I just wanted to quickly mention another Paul Verhoeven movie, Total Recall. Arnold, I love Arnold. Another great space movie. Arnold does his thing, but yeah, Starship Troopers mainly, great time.
Yeah, and I feel like Starship Troopers was one of those movies that too many people thought was going to be one thing going into it, and when it wasn't that, they were just like, "Well, that was what the hell was that?" It was, they almost marketed it, if I recall. They basically marketed it as like an action movie, because I'm not quite sure that I don't know if it was intentional, or if they just didn't know how else to market it to get people to go see it in the theater. But I think that people have grown to appreciate it more over time. And I don't think there's a lot more that I can say about the elements of it that you haven't already touched on, except Michael Ironside. Has he played anything except for like that character over and over and over again? But he does it so well, so you can't really hate on him for it.
Yeah, he is exceptional. And I was researching that recently. It is amazing how people misread the movie upon its release. Like critics, like people thought it was this pro-fascist movie and all this and that. And I don't think the movie's particularly subtle with its satire. Like that's why it makes me so perplexed by it. It's like
the Neil Patrick Harris character is basically dressed like a Nazi through the
yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. But like you said, I'm very glad that over time it's found this accepting audience that have adored it and continue to carry the torch for the movie.
All right, so you stole one of mine. Well, actually, stole two of mine, but so I'm gonna move to the next one, which is this is one that's from my childhood, and it is Flight of the Navigator, which came out in 1986.
Haven't seen it, so I'm interested to hear about it.
All right, so I'll give you a little synopsis here. The plot of this movie is really, especially for like a kid's, like it was a Disney production, so like for what it was, it was pretty clever. So basically, a 12-year-old boy, gets, I forget exactly if he gets lost in the woods or something happens where he ends up disappearing, and this is in 1978, and then he reappears in like 1984. Or 1984, 86. So basically he disappeared 8 years ago. And then in present time, when the movie was made, he reappears, but he hasn't like aged or anything. He's the exact same kid that disappeared 8 years ago. And so it ends up turning out that he he was linked to this spacecraft, this alien spacecraft that he was that he was picked up by, and he became the navigator of this spacecraft. And the spacecraft has basically a computer that runs the whole ship, that is voiced by Paul Rubens.
Oh, great casting.
This was actually one of Sarah Jessica Parker's like first like roles, like where she was pretty high up in the cast of characters. So there's this, I could go into much more detail about what the whole movie is about, but it gets a little complicated. But I'll just say that it was a really fun ride when you were a kid, and then as you got older, you could still appreciate the movie because there were these other more adult things that were happening, like the adults and everybody, the government, etc., trying to figure out what happened to this kid. Holy crap, there's a spaceship. Like his parents are grappling with my son is here, but he hasn't aged. So how are we dealing with all of this? It's really a clever premise, and I think pretty well executed. And the design of the ship, both inside and out, I thought was really cool. And especially for 1986, the technology that they used, like for the to animate the spacecraft flying and to make some of the things inside the spacecraft, which also on top of everything else has various creatures that have been collected throughout the galaxy in it, it's all very cool. So I would highly recommend it. You can find it on Disney Plus, I believe.
Perfect.
And it's a fun ride. So, it's a fun ride, but it also has it has enough of the other stuff to add some depth to it. It's not just a fun movie with a kid flying around the spaceship. There's some other stuff going on.
I'm excited to see it because I think the 80s, kind of like you mentioned, the family films were a bit more mature and didn't really condescend to kids, and were able to kind of ride that balancing act of being a fun piece of entertainment while having kind of more adult and human stakes. So you have me very intrigued to see that, and I'm glad it's on Disney Plus because I'll add that on my watch list right after we record. My next pick, I'm going to go in the Disney realm too. Treasure Planet, a childhood classic for me at least. I love this movie as a kid. I remember leaving the theater and wishing I could be Jim Hawkins doing the surf space riding around through the mountains like he was like skating. I absolutely love that. But I think at face value, a lot of people just took the movie as, oh, it's Treasure Island in space. And like, I get it. Like, fine, you can come to that conclusion. But I just think there's such imagination and fun to be had with how this movie achieves its kind of twist on the familiar tale. I love the voice acting. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt does a nice job. David Allen Pierce, David Hyde Pierce, I think. It just has a really great voice cast. The animation, I'm a sucker for 2D animation personally, and I think the worlds it envelops its audience in it is just really striking and imaginative, and it really, to me, is one of those like final benchmarks of like the 2D animation era. Sadly, like it's kind of when the 3D was really starting to dominate the zeitgeist. So for me, it kind of holds this personal attachment to as kind of like one of the last great 2D animated films. So I love Treasure Planet personally.
For sure. I think that's a vastly underrated movie. We've talked about it before. I think in the Disney Brackets podcast we did a while back. And I mean, you're absolutely right. People did kind of write it off as, oh, it's a remake of Treasure Island, and it's just like, well, sure, but like it is. It was a refreshing, imaginative take on it. Like nobody like crapped all over the Muppets for doing a remake of Treasure Island,
great
which
point.
I also love, by the way. But like for some reason, this was a problem for people. And you're absolutely right. The animation is great. The world or the world building in it, or the I guess space building that there is in it, is really great. And I think that they took something that was a classic and put their own imaginative spin on it, and I don't see what's necessarily wrong with that, especially if you're not trying to hide that that's what it is. It's one thing if you're saying no, that's not what this is, this is original. No, taking a fresh take on something that is classic isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just you got to own that that's what you're doing, and I think that Disney did. They owned that, yes, this is our reimagining of of this adventure.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think the John Silver dynamic, at least in this, feels more fresh. Right? I do think I find him more of an interesting character in this than other iterations. Like there is more of a balance of kind of his dual personas, I think, and I really love how that character is portrayed here, and especially the look of him. Like it's just the way it's kind of like steampunk, like the way it kind of reinterprets these kind of classic pirate elements in a space setting. I just think a lot of that, like you said, the space building, I think a lot of that is just so fascinating and engaging to me. And like I said, when I was a kid, it really just ignited the creativity in my brain and really wowed me. So it's a movie that I loved back then and I still love today.
All right. So I'm going to go to one that was on my honorable mentions, but it didn't make the cut when I cut it off at 5. So I don't have a lot of information written down about this one. But another one that came to mind was Mars Attacks.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard nothing but great things.
Haven't. That was one of those movies. The first time that I saw that, I watched that with my dad, and my dad hated it. Absolutely hated it. I don't think that he understood, and at the time I didn't understand either, like what the source material was for this movie, and I just kind of accepted it as what it was, like this, but my dad absolutely hated this movie. But it's one of those movies that I can't say that I've sought out a lot, but anytime that I see it or somebody makes a reference to it, I can't help but smile. It's just it's a fun movie. It's got a great cast. I'm trying to think: Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Michael J. Fox, Pierce Brosnan. Like there's a whole bunch of like really great people who just like fit the characters they're supposed to play, and they play them to like 11, every single one of them, which is exactly what you want for this movie. Just the ridiculous factor of this movie is terrific, and it's fun and not necessarily for the kids, but and I think that's what my father thought, was that this was going to be more of a fun father-son movie, and it was not that. But fun movie.
It sounds schlocktastic, so I really I've been dying to see that for a while. I think Tim Burton directed it, if I'm not mistaken, too. So that seems like a very interesting.
That would be another reason why my father would hate it.
It did seem like an interesting kind of diversion in its filmography, but the cast you mentioned, I absolutely love. So that's been on my watch list for a bit, and I'm definitely excited to check it out. My last pick, I'm going to give a shout out to Christopher Nolan, the blockbuster director of our times. Interstellar, honestly, one of my favorite movies of his. Christopher Nolan, you expect the grand scale. The movie is a 3-hour epic. You go through all these different planets, from this sea world where these crashing waves knocking over their ship, to the cold mountains of this like kind of snow planet. All these things, but at the same time, I think more than most of his movies, there's a very emotional core to it. We have Matthew McConaughey, who is kind of recruited for this space mission to save the world, but as he goes further into space, space-time passes differently, so he's aging and kind of missing, watching his life kind of pass before his eyes as he's going on this mission. So it's a very deftly done balance of the blockbuster thrills while having a very moving and emotional story to kind of bring it all home. So I absolutely love Interstellar. It's a great film.
That's one that I have not seen, and it's basically been because hammering out 3 hours
to watch
of time is challenging. But yeah, it's one that I've heard nothing but praise for, and I'll occasionally see clips of it when I'm scrolling through TikTok, because people will lift things from the movie and put them on TikTok. So I'm willing to bet that I've seen probably about a quarter of a movie simply from TikTok.
You're probably not wrong. That it honestly is what ends up getting me to see some movies sometimes, or if it just keeps popping up on the feed, it's like, all right, maybe I need to watch this movie again or something. But you're not wrong. I will say Interstellar has one of the best cameos you'll see in a movie. There's an A-list actor who they don't put on the poster, the trailers, or anything, who pops up randomly. So I'll just have that as a little tease.
Okay, with the non-spoiler tease. I like it. I like it. All right, so what you're saying is that to get you to watch a couple of these movies, I'm just going to have to continuously send you reels and TikTok videos of Contact. I don't even know if that would exist, but and Mars Attacks, which I know exist.
I definitely want to. Mars Attacks, I might just watch it this week, honestly. I've been dying to see that, so I'm glad you mentioned it to kind of rekindle that memory in my mind.
All right. So, do you have any other space movies that are on your list?
I think we covered pretty much all of the ones. I had a couple honorable mentions, like Total Recall. There's a movie called Ad Astra with Brad Pitt that I really love. A kind of a more meditative space film. Moon with Sam Rockwell. That's a more kind of a chamber piece, kind of set in a spaceship, and there's a lot of mystery and intrigue. But yeah, I love sci-fi, so this was a really great opportunity to kind of share that love for a lot of great films, in my opinion.
Alrighty, so we are recording this on May 28th, which means we are, I don't know, are we in or quickly approaching summer movie season?
So for me, May 1 is or like the first weekend of May is usually viewed as the kickoff point. I will say this year has been very interesting because usually you'll have the big Marvel movie or like some kind of superhero movie or Star Wars or something. This year's summer kickoff was The Devil Wears Prada 2, which was actually a big hit. But it's been a very interesting summer so far because we really haven't had as many of those traditional blockbusters aside from Mandalorian and Grogu. It's been more kind of genre movies. We had a lot of horror movies, Mortal Kombat 2. So a lot of the bigger blockbusters are still to come. So it's a good time to kind of talk about what's to come.
All right. So I'm not sure, like, how do you define blockbuster, I guess, because is blockbuster something that does well at the box office? Because from that definition, The Mandalorian and Grogu wouldn't really apply, it seems.
I would say any movie that has more of a big budget, big property attached to it, big cast, something like that. Mandalorian and Grogu, I have seen it has been met with more kind of skepticism, which I feel like that's been par for the course for a lot of Disney projects. I'll say some of the criticism about its financials, I don't think is entirely fair. It is a cheaper budgeted Star Wars movie than most. And the other thing I think people forget with some of these Disney movies, the merchandise. Grogu, this is just a great opportunity to sell more toys and all this, etc. So I think Disney will be fine in the end. I think The Mandalorian will do well.
I'm not worried about Disney's finances.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I, not to get too much into the movie, but I think the movie has gotten a bad rap from people. I liked it. I had a fun time with it. I think people kind of sometimes people have their knives out for movies in like the critic sphere where it's this kind of group think of, oh, this is lazy. It's just an episode of the show. It's like, I think it's a lot of fun, and it blends a lot of kind of old school serial elements, kind of like the show did. It's just kind of give my quick thoughts on the movie. So I'm sure you'll have a good time when you check it out.
I hope to check it out. I've got to find the time to do that. That's one that, like, if I thought that I mentioned this on the podcast last week. If I thought my daughter could handle it, I would take her. But she said that, Zootopia 2 freaked her out. So I'm not sure if this is the,
probably a good call
going
to
the
wait.
theaters is the first, this is the first time that she should, experience that. So anyway, from what I've understood, it's a great popcorn movie, and that there's room for that in Star Wars as much as there's room for the Andors of the world. So I hope that I enjoy it as much as honestly a lot of the people who I know said that they have. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to invite any spoilers inadvertently, both for myself and for listeners.
Sounds good.
So, moving right along. But actually, speaking of merchandise, while my daughter has never seen a minute of The Mandalorian, she loves Baby Yoda. She loves Grogu. So you're absolutely right with the marketing aspect of this. Even from a, by association, she knows who Baby Yoda is because, I'm a Star Wars fan. My wife watches Star Wars because I'm a Star Wars fan. I would say at this point she's a Star Wars fan. So there's this whole spin-off even from the main, audience that they are able to capitalize with projects like this.
100%.
So looking ahead, you said it's been a little bit interesting to start, but what are some of the things that you are really interested in seeing throughout the summer? What are the ones that have really piqued your interest and you've got marked on your calendar?
Yeah, to start, Disclosure Day. Steven Spielberg going back into the sci-fi realm. This comes out, I think, June 12th. I've been watching all of like the classic Spielberg sci-fi movies. I watched Minority Report last night, and he hasn't really done a movie like this in a long time. He's been more kind of in the realm of the historical movies, biopics, things like that. So I can't wait to see him make an original sci-fi movie. The trailer looked very interesting. It doesn't really show its hand, which I love. I think too many movie trailers now, they kind of share the whole movie premise in 2 minutes, and I hate that. So this has a lot of kind of mystery enveloped within it. You have Josh O'Connor, who's been a growing actor, and Emily Blunt as your stars, and Colin Firth as well. So I think great cast. Steven Spielberg, what's not to love? So that's definitely high on my bingo card. The week after that, I think a movie that's probably on both of our lists, Toy Story 5. I can't wait. I'm excited. Put me down. Chris is mixed for you.
I'm going to begrudgingly watch it. But I'm still in the camp that they should have stopped at 3. This feels like a money grab.
I agree. I agree that 3 is the perfect ending. I agree with that.
My real question here is, how are you going to feasibly get Woody back with the gang after they parted ways in the last movie? Now, my theory, and it's probably wrong, but my theory was, of course, they have been when they leave Woody with Bo in Toy Story 4, they're with a carnival. My theory is that carnival rolls into Bonnie's town, and that's how they are able to make this connection again, because there has to be a way that those characters reconnect, right?
Yeah, I
mean,
agree.
You can't just have Woody show up again.
Yeah, I did see in the trailer, I think they were talking like through a radio or like walkie-talkies or something. So maybe they had some kind of way of staying in touch. But let me
Okay,
make
I hate that idea more.
let me make my pitch to try to get you excited. So I agree, Toy Story 3, the perfect ending. Nothing can erase that. I do think making this movie about the ever-present nature of technology and kind of how it's, deserting toys. Like, there's this line in the trailer that really hit me where it's like, Woody's like, how can we compete? Toys are for play and technology's for everything. So I do think the premise of this is genius. Like, I think it's a great, thing to kind of explore as something that's you see with kids now, so common and just getting lost in the screens and everything. And I've only heard rumblings, but it seems like this movie is going to be more Jessie centric, which I've heard. So I'm also really excited to see that as well. So I agree with you. Toy Story 3 can't be beat, but I'm at least, I trust Pixar still. I'm excited to see what they do. So I have to have that on my list personally.
Yeah, I do think that there's merit to the premise. I do think that there's an interesting element of Disney, which is, basically leaning into AI and into technology in such a way. Also putting out a movie that's basically policing the way that kids play. That strikes me as, talking out of both sides of your mouth. But, I don't think it's going to be a terrible movie. I just kind of balk all the time because it's just like, man, you had the perfect ending, but you just could not pass up the money. And I get it. They're a corporation. They're made to make money. But I don't know. Yeah. Honestly, if they wanted to make it a Jesse Ford movie and just leave Woody out of it, then, the adventure continues and Woody's not there. I don't know. I feel like that's going to be an element that distracts from the rest of the movie. But
that's fair.
That's just a me thing, and I need to get over that.
I mean, you wouldn't have balding Woody though. I don't know if you saw that.
That is a nice touch. That is a nice touch.
My next movie,
as somebody who can appreciate.
It seems like there's gonna be a few things they do to age Woody up, so I'm interested to see that. My next film, Supergirl. Last year's Superman was my favorite movie of last year. One of my favorite superhero movies ever, honestly. I think James Gunn did an awesome job defining a new kind of fresh face for DC, which had been kind of languid in the last few years. I think it's going to be really cool to see this character finally get her time to shine on the big screen after a couple of decades of being away. And I just trust DC overall, so I'm excited for that. A couple quick hitters. Another Christopher Nolan movie this summer. We have The Odyssey. That looks super epic. That's a movie that's going to be I'm sure it's going to be sold out every IMAX theater across the country because people are going to want to see that on the biggest screen. And I'm not super familiar with the classic fable that it's based on, so it's going to be really thrilling for me to experience that for the first time. On the Disney side of things, we have Moana, the live action remake coming out in July. That I'm kind of a little more tepid on, to be honest.
Me too.
I think Disney, they keep going with this trend, and I think The Rock, he looks a little like an Uncanny Valley in the trailer, but
I think the problem is that there's not enough separation. Like this, this movie is only 10 years old, so it's not like you're reimagining something that your parents grew up with, and now you're reimagining it for the next generation and a new way for the parents to experience it. I don't understand, some of the other projects. It was just okay, it's been 20 years since Aladdin came out, so sure, go ahead, make a live action Aladdin, as terrible as that was. But it feels too soon. It feels like they've accelerated the timeline. They're talking about doing a Rapunzel. Well, Rapunzel's actually older than Tangle's older than Moana, but you're talking about a generation of movies that doesn't feel old enough. And maybe this is just me trying to convince myself I'm not that old. But it feels like they're accelerating this process and like trying to pump out these live action movies, and they've run out of ideas for the more quote unquote classic ones that now they're going in this direction. They're speeding up the timeline on when they do these.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, honestly. I that was my first thought too. It's like, oh, didn't we just see Moana recently? And it's really been diminishing returns for Disney with these live action remakes. Like, in 2019 was probably the peak when Aladdin and Lion King were like these billion-dollar grossers, but Snow White was like a huge box office flop last year. So I think this Moana and Tangled live action remake, these are really going to be the litmus test if Disney's going to really continue to do these. So I'm more curious to see how that movie kind of comes together more than excited, but I am very curious because it does seem like it's coming at an interesting potential turning point for the Disney strategy. My last film I'll mention, a new Spider-Man Brand New Day. Tom Holland, this will be his fourth time in the Spider-Man role. I haven't really loved any of his Spider-Man movies, but I think this one to me looks like it has the potential to be the best. I like that for the first time we're having an actor really aging along with the character, where the first Spider-Man, he's a high school student. Now he's this kind of adult trying to find his way. So that element really has me interested. And as someone who loves the Spider-Man comics, it's looking to be more of a street level story where it's not this like earth-ending consequences. So that also has me very interested and intrigued. So Spider-Man Brand New Day, that comes out end of July, and I'm sure that'll be another big hit.
I'll readily admit I haven't seen a Spider-Man movie since Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3.
Hey, Tobey's still my favorite Spider-Man too, so I think you can't go wrong there.
All right. So those are some of the movies that Matt is looking forward to, and probably you should be looking forward to as well this summer. Any surprises so far this year in movies you've seen? Anything that you were pleasantly surprised was as good as it was? Something that maybe you went in with low expectations, you had a free night, you had the annual pass to the cinema in your hand, and you were just like, all right, well, I've got a couple hours to kill, and walked out and was just like, wow, that was actually really good.
Great question. And one movie that comes to mind recently is the Mortal Kombat 2. And I love Mortal Kombat, the games and all that. I thought the last Mortal Kombat movie they did kind of stunk. Like it was just very basic and uninteresting and flat. And I didn't really think it captured the spirit of the games. This new Mortal Kombat movie was an absolute blast. Got Carl Urban as Johnny Cage doing his thing. I had such a great time with that. So that comes to mind. And then one other one I'll mention, and I think this is a movie that's popular with a lot of people, but I think Project Hail Mary, not only how good that movie was, but just the success of it as like a big, bold piece of science fiction storytelling was really a great thing to see. And it's an awesome Ryan Gosling role. It is a long movie. It's like 2 hours, 40 minutes, but it's irreverent, it's funny, it's emotional, it's very based in kind of practical science stuff. I think it really is one of those crowd pleasing movies that can appeal to anyone. So I've been really delighted to see how that movie, how it worked for me, and then how it was received by everyone else as well.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks you for taking the time to talk with me about, movies on the whole, movies about space, and giving me a glimpse into letting me live vicariously a little bit through you, because it's been a while since I've been to Disney World. This past year we went on a Disney cruise instead. So it's been a while since I've been to. It's been a while, so we've got our next trip planned out for February of next year. So it'll be interesting to see, especially some of those things that I've seen have been opening up Well, one thing that I'm really excited about, and I think that you would appreciate, is once the animation courtyard area and some of those attractions are opened up for real. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that some of that will start popping up, over the next year or so that I can tell you all about them, in later February next year.
Perfect. I think you're going at a good time because like a lot of this stuff I was seeing like in progress or about to open. So when you go in February, you'll be able to have the whole cornucopia of new Disney experiences.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You have a great evening.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Maz's Musings podcast. And thank you very much to Matt for joining me and talking some movies. Of course, not just movies. We also talked about some of the stuff that he did on his recent Disney trip. And that was awesome as well. So listen, if you have any insight on some of your favorite movies that are about or have something to do with space, or have some other topic that you'd love to talk with me about, I would love to hear from you. And of course, the number one way to do that is to join us at the Musin Place, which is the Maz's Musings podcast Facebook group, excuse me. We also have the regular Facebook page, which you can reach us on as well. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter at Maz's Musings Pod. You can also find us on TikTok at Maz's Musings Podcast. Remember to put cast at the end. You can also find us on Blue Sky, and we have a YouTube page that I would love it if you would join me on. Now, beyond that, you can find this and more information on our website, mazsmusings.wordpress.com. And in addition to what I just talked about, you can also find past episodes, more about me in this podcast, and how to subscribe to the newsletter. Now, the newsletter, which took a hiatus this week, sorry, I actually forgot what day it was because of the holiday. So next week, there will be a brand spanking new newsletter in your inbox. And most of the time, it comes every week in your inbox. And, well, it tells you more about this podcast, what you might have missed, what's coming up, things that I find interesting, all that kind of stuff. And right next to that button is another button that will tell you one of the biggest ways to help us and support us. And that is buying us a blue milk. Buying us a blue milk is a small, obligation-free way to help us with some of the small costs that go into putting this podcast together. Now, obviously, beyond monetarily, you can help us out hugely by telling your friends, talking about the podcast. And if you're a little shy, don't want to talk about it out in the real world, go to the internet and like us or give a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever. Give us a review on your favorite podcatcher. And that will help us get bumped up in those algorithms that make us more discoverable to more people. And hey, whether you are buying us blue milk, giving us a review, listening for the first time, whatever it is, I want to thank you for listening. And I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. For the Maz's Musings podcast is brought to you by Hi Dad Soup. Check them out at Mickey and Minutes on Instagram.